a further record about my ruling regarding inmates 3 and 4. Rule 611 of the Rules of Evidence permits the court to exercise reasonable control over the mode and order of examining witnesses and presenting evidence so as to make those procedures effective for determining the truth. That rule is also implicated by the state's motion, and I do find that the limits on media coverage in relation to those 2 inmates are such that the truth may more effectively be determined under Rule 611. In addition, yesterday I allowed the state to ask leading questions of Gypsy Willis. I'm not sure that the record was complete on that. I do find, and did find yesterday, that given her prior relationship with the defendant while she was called by the state as a witness, she is a witness identified with an adverse party, the defendant, and that leading questions of her were appropriate. Do you wish to make any further record in that regard?
Just that I believe it was Tuesday, Your Honor.
It was Tuesday. Thank you. Let's have the jury in. Thank you. Please be seated. Ms. Summers, if you'll come back up to the witness stand. Ladies and gentlemen, by taking a little longer break, we've taken care of some other things so we don't have to break again until lunch. You may continue your examination.
Ms. Summers, we were on tab 30. And,
yes.
And we just discussed a portion of your email, which is the 92308 letter sent on 92408. And you requested a physician friend of yours to get your mother's medical records, right?
A friend of mine.
And in your email, you said a friend who is a physician.
Yeah, he happens to be a physician as well, yes.
And then he responded to you, I was able to get the lab info, right?
Yes.
And you understood that the reason that the hospital wouldn't give you your mother's information was because of HIPAA requirements, government requirements restricting release of medical information, correct?
I was just told that it can only be given to the husband. Or.
You were in your first year of medical school. You understood HIPAA regulations, didn't you?
Yeah, and I actually got these labs before this.
You got them before this?
Well, so what happened the day my mom died, I called one of my friends who happens to be a physician as I was going to the airport getting a ticket to fly home. And he had called the hospital and they had given him my mom's, just her basic labs.
And who's that friend?
It's a friend named Fez Hussein.
I'm sorry, named what?
Fez Hussein, last name Hussein.
And so when did that occur?
That was April 11th.
So he called the very day?
He did.
And so the first time you sent this email was in, or first time you relayed this information to the investigators was in September of 2008, correct?
Yeah, there really wasn't an investigation into my mom's death until 2008.
My question is simply that the first time you relayed the information was in this email in September of 2008, correct?
I don't know if that was the first time.
Okay. And in this email, you had indicated that you tried to get the records for your mother, but you couldn't. And so you called a friend of yours who's a physician, right?
Yes.
And you understood that the physician, in order to get the records, had to say that he was a treating physician of your mother in order to get the records, right?
Speculation, foundation.
Overruled. Given her educational background, she may answer.
Can you say it one more time?
You understood that in order for a physician to get your mother's records, he had to say that he was a treating physician for your mother,
He only got her lab results.
which you weren't able to get.
But he got those on the day of her death. So I never got her full records from the hospital until I was able to get that through the medical examiner when I requested that.
I understand that. In order for him to even get her lab results, he had to call and say that he was your mother's treating physician, right?
That's not always the case, no.
You understood HIPAA regulations, right?
I don't know if I'd had my class at that time. I think it was our second year that we had our legal class.
So you were almost done with your first year of medical school.
That's correct.
And even as somebody who doesn't go to medical school, you understand that hospitals can't just release medical information to anybody who asks for another person, right?
Yes.
And the hospital, in fact, had told you that they could not release your mother's information to you.
They had.
And so you called your friend who is a physician. And he wasn't even in the state of Utah, was he? He was in California.
But it wasn't the same time that that you're referencing here. When I called him, I was going to the hospital. I'm not going to the hospital, going to the airport. And I asked him if he could call the hospital to see how my mom was. I didn't even, at that point, I hadn't even spoken to my brother yet and had him say that my mother was dead. So I had him call the hospital.
You've never, ever relayed this before, have you?
To you?
To me or to anybody in this investigation process, that this phone call to Faiz Hussein was something different than what you relay in this email.
I don't think I was ever asked any specifics about that, but I mean, that's what happened.
And you remember that clearly right now, right?
I remember that, what you're asking me. Yes, I do.
Okay. In this email, you didn't identify the physician, did you?
Let me just look at the rest of it. Yeah, I don't think that was a significant thing. I was just giving him the basic lab values, but this was not my mother's complete hospital record by any means.
Not saying that it was. It was some of her records, right?
Her basic labs, yes.
Some of the records that the hospital told you they wouldn't give you.
I think when I called the hospital, I had asked them, if I could have her full records, but yeah.
And they told you that they wouldn't give them to you, and that's why you called your physician friend.
No, I didn't get her full records ever. These were things that he had jotted down the day of my mom's death and then later emailed them to me. I never contacted him to tell him to to get my mother's records.
Okay. Did you look through the email and you're satisfied that you never disclosed the name of the physician in this 92308 email?
Yeah, I don't think I ever mentioned the name.
And this physician friend, he also shared some opinions about what he thought of your mother's labs, right?
Yes, he had a couple of lines sharing an opinion.
And you sent that, obviously, to the investigators in September of 2008?
That's correct.
And I subsequently sent you a subpoena on or about December 21st of 2012. See that in the first document in that tab? Tab 30?
Uh-huh.
You remember receiving that?
Yes, I do.
And the 13th item that I requested
Yes.
was the name and address of the physician you contacted to obtain a copy of your mother's labs from April 11, 2007.
That's correct.
And you received that subpoena, right?
I did.
You responded to that subpoena, right?
I did.
And on the next page is a copy of your response, right?
Yes.
And on 13, you said, quote, "I did not contact a physician to obtain a copy of my mother's labs."
And that's correct. I didn't contact him to obtain a copy of my mother's labs.
We had a hearing on June 26th of this year, right? Transcript is right there in front of you.
Okay. Yes. Which page would you like me to turn it to?
255.
Yes.
So starting on line 14, I asked you the question, okay, and you provided some medical records to Mr. Whitney in relation to your mother, correct?
That's correct.
And you answered, I don't remember any specifics providing that.
Yeah, I didn't remember at the time what you're referring to.
And then I asked you the question, some medical records in relation to blood tests that were done on your mother on the day that she passed away. And you answered, I did send an email with the blood tests.
That's correct.
And then I asked you, and in that email you indicated that someone else helped you acquire those, correct?
Yes.
And then I said, I asked you that question, someone else helped you acquire those, correct? And you answered, I'd have to look at that email, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And then I said, who was the person that helped you acquire those? And you said, I don't remember. Right?
Yes.
And then I asked you, in the email you indicated that it was a physician, turning to the next page, that helped you get those records.
That's
Right?
correct.
And you answered, I'd have to look at the email. Do you have a copy?
Uh-huh.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then I said, I can pull it up for you if you really need me to get it. And then down below, after discussion, you said, I'd have to look at the email.
Yes.
And then I asked you that I served you a subpoena. Right?
Yes.
And then I asked you who was the person that helped you get the records, and you said that it was Faiz Hussein, right?
Yes.
You didn't say anything in that discussion like you told us today that this conversation, that Faiz went out and did this on his own.
Well, I mean, you didn't ask me any specifics like that.
Yeah, but what I did ask you is who helped you get those records in response to the September 23rd email, and you said Faiz Hussein. You've made up the story that you told today since this interview, haven't you?
No, I have not.
To turn to tab 2. This is a copy of your medical school application to Truro University, correct?
That's correct.
You recognize it?
Haven't seen the full application, but I do recognize my name, yes.
And turn to page 24.
Are they numbered?
Yeah, down at the bottom right-hand corner.
I don't see it being numbered, but I can count.
Okay. Turn to the page that says certification statement. So on the certification statement, it says, I certify that the information that I have recorded in my supplementary application as well as my personal statement is accurate to the best of my knowledge. I recognize that any intentional misrepresentation on my part may cause me to be denied admission or subject me to dismissal from Truro University College of Osteopathic Medicine, Nevada, in the event I was accepted. You see that, right?
Yes, I do.
And then it's got your name typed out, right?
It does.
Date, October 21st, 2005?
That's correct.
And then it's got your signature there, right?
Yes,
And that is your signature, right?
that is.
And then if you turn back a couple pages towards page 21, there's a section that lists, under section 11, employment experience during the last 3 years. Most recent experience first.
Yes,
And you list Rachel Robertson, au
Yes.
pair, 5/2005 to the present.
that's correct.
Robertson is the married name of your sister Rachel, correct?
Yes.
So you said that you were working as a nanny for your sister Rachel from May 2005 to the present, right?
Yes.
Your sister Rachel doesn't have any children, does she?
I put her down as a reference, but it was referencing to me being at home taking care of my siblings.
But what you put is that you were a nanny for your sister who has no children.
I did put her name down.
So if Rachel had been called as your reference, you had prepared her to say that you were working for her as a nanny, right?
I don't think I prepared her to say that.
In 2005, Rachel had been divorced from her husband, correct?
Objection. Relevant, Your Honor.
Overruled, she may answer.
I don't believe she was divorced at that time.
Turn back to the letters of recommendation.
Where would they be?
Towards the end. So
Okay.
Actually, it's the last page. You understood letters of recommendation to be an important aspect of the admission process to medical school, correct?
They are important, that's true.
And you submitted a letter of recommendation from Joseph Martin, Adjunct Faculty, Biological Science Department, Utah Valley State College, correct?
I didn't submit any of the letters of recommendations. They were submitted directly to the school.
This was all part of your application that you certified was true, correct?
I don't know which, my last page here has from Dr. Kendall Brown.
Joseph Martin was your father, Martin Joseph MacNeill, correct?
I'm confused because I don't have a copy. I don't know what you're talking about.
Talking about the letter of recommendation in your file.
Objection, Foundation. She's testified she's not aware of this. This would have gone directly to the school, not through her.
Does she have it in the binder?
If it's not,
You said the last page. This is the last page. I've not seen this before.
You've never seen that before?
I have not.
You never asked your dad to write a letter of recommendation using only part of his name so as not to be identified with you?
I definitely did not do that.
And I'll move on.
Do you want this
Yeah.
this back, or should I put it? Okay. There would be no reason for me to do that.
You needed to submit letters of recommendation with your
I had
application, right?
I had double the amount of letters of recommendation that I needed but when I applied for medical school.
Okay. We talked yesterday about your talk at the funeral, at your mother's funeral, right?
Yes, I
And you went over the transcript, right?
That's correct.
And you looked at the transcript and you said you didn't remember saying that your mother wasn't feeling well on April 11th, right?
Yeah, I don't remember her saying that.
And so you needed to, and you didn't remember you saying that at the funeral, right?
That's correct. I didn't remember that.
And so you said that you wanted to hear a copy of, or hear what you said, right?
Yeah, I did say that.
Okay. So we've got that clip. It's actually just audio.
Oh, is it just audio? Thank you.
Hope that this will pick up.
Last time I spoke to my mom, she was happy. She wasn't feeling, she was feeling a little sick, but
That was your voice, right?
That was my voice.
And that was your talk at the funeral, right?
That was my mom's funeral.
And what you said is that the last time you spoke with your mom, she was happy. She wasn't feeling, but she was feeling a little sick. That's what you said, right?
I just don't remember her saying that she was feeling a little sick. I remember her being up and
But you,
getting ready for the day.
But you remembered it on the day of her funeral, right? 3 days later. And since that time, you have said over and over and over again that your mother was feeling great. There was no problems on April 11th.
I just don't remember her feeling bad at all. She
A
was
lot
feeling
of things
great.
you don't remember accurately in this case, right?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. You may redirect.
Give a little context to what was just last exchange with Mr. Spencer. On what day did your mom pass away? Again, what was the date?
April 11th, 2007.
And when did she have surgery?
April 3rd, 2007.
So approximately, 8 days before her death.
That's correct.
Was she still recovering from surgery?
She was.
When you last talked with your mom, did she still have a hospital bed in the house?
She did.
Was she still taking some medications as far as the recovery?
She was.
Was she completely herself on April 11th, the morning of April 11th, when compared to prior to surgery?
She wasn't definitely not 100%, but she had been doing really well.
She was still recovering.
She was still
Doing well.
Still, but still recovering, but doing well. That's correct.
Did you misrepresent anything on your application for medical school?
I guess I put Rachel down as a reference to an employment, but I was functioning as a nanny, being at my home and taking care of my sisters.
Okay. With respect to this discussion with Fez Hussein, the collection of information with respect to your mom's death, you've looked at the email in question today.
Yes, I have.
Has that helped refresh your memory as to what went on back then?
It did. I mean, that was from 2008.
And at the prior hearings, you did not have a copy of that email
I did not.
to effectively
To reference.
respond, to
Yeah.
reference. Why were you seeking information as to your mother's death?
Because I believed my father killed her.
Objection, Your Honor. Move to strike.
Overruled. The answer may stand given that the door was opened on cross.
You mentioned an investigation that ensued at some point after your mom's death.
That's correct.
Can you describe what that investigation was, generally speaking, and when it was initiated?
So it had been over a year since my mother's death when I was contacted finally by Doug Whitney, who was an investigator at the Utah County Attorney's Office, and he began looking into my mom's case. Well, myself and my family, we had been concerned for quite some time as soon as my mother died.
Objection, Your Honor. Non-responsive.
Sustained.
Did you reach out to the Utah County Attorney's Office Investigations Unit?
Yes, we were reaching out to everyone, trying to get someone to look into my mother's death.
Okay. You mentioned Doug Whitney, and there's been some discussions with respect to an affidavit that he prepared. Did you prepare Doug Whitney's affidavit?
No, I did not.
Are you responsible for what language he used in the affidavit?
I don't think I would be responsible for that.
Did you review the affidavit before he would have submitted it or prepared it?
I don't believe I ever reviewed it before, no.
Okay. You indicated today that the anesthesiologist on the morning of April 3rd, 2011, the day of your mom's surgery,
Yes,
indicated that she was in fine enough health to go forward with surgery.
that's correct.
And that was with respect to the blood pressure, correct?
Yes, it was just very, very mildly elevated that day.
Okay. Was that consistent with what you knew in the days and weeks leading up to the surgery? As far as her blood pressure?
Yes, well, leading up to the surgery, she had just recently been prescribed an antihypertensive medication, and she had been taking it, I don't know exactly how long before her surgery, but for her mild hypertension.
You recall your mother's misgivings about moving forward with the surgery at this time on April 3rd, 2007, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And that was in relation to a discussion you overheard between your parents.
yes, when I was in the car driving to the preoperative consultation.
And what did your dad say to your mom in that conversation?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered and not, asked and answered.
I'll move on, Your Honor.
Sustained.
How long were you in Utah following your mother's funeral? Do you recall?
Only a couple of days. I was told I needed to leave.
By whom?
My father.
Were you present in the home when Gypsy came into the home first as the nanny?
No,
Were you present in the home when she was hired
no.
to be the nanny? On the day of April 10th and April 11th, 2007, who lived in the home? How many kids? Your father was there.
My father, my mother, my little sister Ada, who was 6 at the time, Elle, Giselle, and Sabrina.
And this was a school day for the kids, April 11th.
It was a Wednesday.
It was a work day for your father.
That's correct.
It's a rather large family.
Yeah.
Was there a need to do laundry often at your home?
All the time.
Safe to say every day?
Every day there would be either washing and folding, and yeah, it's a lot of kids.
There's been some discussion today about your administration of Percocet to your mom as far as a half pill or a full pill and things like that. Towards the latter part of her recovery prior to her death, how are you administering the Percocet to her?
Just giving it to her. I mean, I would break it up, give it to her usually at a half. I think, right before she died, she was only taking maybe 1 or 2 Percocets. That's throughout the whole day. So I would break it up at times and give it to her But like I said before, she was weaning off most of her medications.
Okay. Do you recall receiving a $5,000 gift from your father?
I do.
And how was that received? Can you explain the circumstances?
Yeah, it was my sister Rachel and Damien and myself. We were in my parents' room. My mom was there as well, and my father was there. And I believe this was around Easter time, so shortly before my mom's death, but I'm not 100% sure.
Were you in fact given $5,000
Was given a yes.
in the form of a check?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of the reason behind that $5,000 gift?
My dad just said he was giving us all $5,000.
Was that unusual?
It was unusual just to be handed money for nothing. There were times, that my parents had given us money, but it was for a specific reason.
Like what?
Like my down payment for holding my spot at my medical school, which I think was $1,000. Or let me think what other specifics for me. Maybe my down payment for my apartment in Henderson. But I don't ever recall a time where I was just given money. And I remember I looked, well, I don't know if I can say I looked at my mom and I just thought it was a little weird. And she just said, "Oh, take it,"
Okay. There was discussion, and then you were actually showed a clip from a 2020 episode yesterday.
Yeah, it showed a really small clip.
Did that represent the entirety of the program that aired on 2020?
No, it did not.
Did that represent your interview with 2020?
No, I don't think it would fully represent that.
Was that an excerpt of an interview?
It was an excerpt, and our interview was about 8 hours long.
Okay. There was some discussion of a lawsuit pending
Yes.
with respect to the house,
That's correct.
the family home. Do you stand to gain anything financially if your father is convicted for killing your mother?
Not at all. I've spent so much more money than I'd ever receive. No, I don't stand to gain anything.
There was discussion yesterday on cross-examination with you obtaining your father's password on his phone.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Because my mom was worried he was having an affair and wanted to look at his phone records.
We've talked about the drug Ambien. You're familiar with what Ambien is?
Yes.
And what is Ambien?
It's a sedative. It puts you to sleep.
You're aware that your mom was prescribed Ambien by Dr. Thompson.
Yes.
Did your father ask for that prescription?
That was one of the prescriptions that he had written down that he wanted Dr. Thompson to prescribe.
There's also a lot of discussion about your official statement that you prepared.
Yes.
In this case. Did that official statement exhaust all of the facts associated with April 10th, April 11th?
No, I mean, it was really just a summary of the events, and I had them in bullet and paragraph form. It was just what I was writing down. This wasn't anything that I was being questioned with the police officer to get detail.
Okay. I'm going to hand you the official statement of Alexis MacNeill. There was discussion yesterday that in your statement you did not refer to the PDR incident, and that's the physician's desk reference.
Mm-hmm.
May I approach your Honor?
You may.
Will you read that first paragraph?
Mr. Bernardo, can I see which statement you used?
What's the title of this document, Ms. Summers?
Official Statement of Alexis M. MacNeill.
Okay. Is it safe to say that you've given more statements, more than just one statement, to law enforcement?
Definitely, yes.
What does that paragraph say?
Should I just start with what you've underlined?
Sure.
Okay. He had written up this list at home and wanted to make sure that my mom would get specific drugs. I had gone into my parents' room while he was making the list. He had his big PDA, and I guess I mistyped that out, and was reading it. I asked him what he was doing because I'd never seen him look at that book before. He told me that he was researching medication that he wanted my mom to be prescribed. He said that he wanted to make sure none of the medication interacted poorly.
And do you have a date, approximate date on when that statement was created or submitted to the law enforcement?
Would that be what this little sticker is up here?
What does that date?
It says 7/23/2008.
There was a lot of discussion yesterday on cross-examination about the morning of April 5th, 2007, when you found your mother sedated from taking medications the night before. You were challenged, and the suggestion was that you have changed your story with respect to how sedated your mother was in any communication.
Mm-hmm.
You have a copy of the preliminary hearing transcript.
I do. Hold on.
Would you turn to page 809?
Yes.
Actually, turn to page 808.
808, okay.
I'm going to ask questions, and this is your preliminary hearing transcript testimony.
Okay.
I'm going to ask the question, and you answer. Okay, what time do you feel like she was totally conscious and aware? What time during that day?
Oh, later on in that evening.
Okay, so she was totally out of it all day?
Not totally out of it, but you asked conscious and able. What was your initial question?
Okay, let's break it down. When do you feel like, what time did you feel like she was conscious and able to communicate?
Communicate what?
Communicate like?
Like she can say ow, or I mean, she said that a few times, but...
So there was communication between your mom and you prior to her totally waking up.
Yeah, and like I said before, I mean, maybe I should have used a different word before. I think I used lucid in the past, but more like she was lucid and then more fully lucid where I was able to communicate with her. She was, throughout the day, she was awake enough where I could, give her some medication and things like that. But to have my full conversation with her, it was later on in that day, early evening.
Okay. I'm also going to hand you a transcript from your interview on January 5th, 2011.
Okay.
Just going to direct your attention to lines 11 through 16. Would you just read that to yourself?
Yes.
Was that a discussion with law enforcement?
Yes.
And was there a discussion about how coherent your mom was during that day?
Yes.
Did you tell law enforcement that there was some communication between your mom?
I did.
And what did that communication consist of?
I said she'd be kind of moaning. She'd be kind of moaning a little bit, but not, I knew she was, and then that wasn't very eloquent. And then I also said, no, she wasn't coherent. But I did describe that she was moaning. And then it took hours before she was finally fully coming to.
The Zyrtec pad on the date of April 5th of 2007 indicates that you gave, let's see here, it's like you gave her one Percocet at 2:45 p.m.
That's correct.
approximately 7 hours after you found her fully sedated.
Yes, like I said, it took hours and hours.
Would that have been in response to the moaning and the pain she was experiencing?
Yes.
Well, let's just ask the obvious question. If your mom was fully sedated approximately 7 hours after you first found her, could you have communicated with her?
If she was fully sedated at that time?
Yes.
No.
This Zyrtec pad was created at the time these events were occurring.
Yes.
Is this the first report or notes that you've taken in connection with what was going on with your mom that day? First in time?
Yes.
Okay. The Zyrtec log represents how many days, do you recall?
Through day 5, I believe. So I didn't write anything down the day of her actual surgery.
Okay.
But after she was discharged from the hospital, that's when I began keeping these notes.
And do you recall when you returned to Henderson, Nevada to resume school on April 10th?
Yes.
What day would that have been with respect to the surgery?
That would have been 8 days after, 7 days after.
So 7 days afterward.
Yeah, a week. It was her 1 week post-op visit that
So
she'd had the day.
that's an incomplete log of your care for her during that period of time.
It is incomplete.
And you talked about a black book.
Yes.
Why did you use a black book? What was the purpose of that?
Well, I had been using the black book to document her vitals and her food intake, what she was eating, but I wanted to combine it all together to make it more organized, or have like the food and the vitals by when she was getting her medications. And also the black book was lined as well, so I was able to get it a little more neat.
This pad isn't bound. There's loose paper,
Yeah.
correct?
And it was a bound little flip book.
When you talked to Dr. Fricke the day following your mom's death, why did you want to speak to Dr. Fricke?
I wanted to hear what she had to say. I wanted to know what she had found in the autopsy.
Do you remember, was it you that called, or did your dad call?
I didn't call.
With respect, you were asked about some of Dr. Fricke's notes that she had taken. Are you aware of what Dr. Fricke was thinking at the time she was writing her notes?
No, I wasn't.
Did you write those notes for her?
I did not.
With respect to the post-operative visits that you attended with your mom and Dr. Thompson, following the night of April 4th and the early morning hours of April 5th, this overdose situation, is there a reason why you didn't tell Dr. Thompson about that?
Because I was the one giving her the medication. after that incident, and she wasn't having any issues with that.
You testified previously today that you believed, following April 11th, 2007, you believe your father murdered your mom.
I did believe that. I do believe that.
At the time of the first overdose, did you believe your father was attempting to murder your mom?
Objection, Your Honor. Her beliefs are not relevant.
I'll allow her to answer. It goes to at what point in time she formulated that view.
I didn't believe that at that time.
Okay.
I wouldn't have left my mom if I'd believed that.
You wouldn't have left on April 10th?
I wouldn't have left her with him.
Okay. When your father demonstrated finding your mom in the bathtub, was this demonstration done twice?
Yes,
Did you observe it both times?
I did.
Okay. I'm handing you State's Exhibit number 18. There's been some discussion of that exhibit already. Who's that a picture of again?
That's Gypsy Jillian Willis.
Are you familiar with what she is wearing in that photograph?
Yes.
Your Honor.
Will you approach, Counselor? It's sustained.
Your Honor, I will pass the witness.
Thank you. Any recross?
No, nothing further.
Ladies and gentlemen, do you have questions for Ms. Summers? If you do, you'll just pass them to the end of the row, and I'll review those. Do you need a break of any kind? You okay? All right. Counsel, would you approach